Hi riders, welcome to the Zuatu Cycling podcast. This is a new podcast from a brand, Zuatu Cycling. We are producing the best cycling shoes in the world. In this podcast, we will cover different themes from general cycling topics to how to get the best performance from you. And today we are discussing a piece of equipment that is often taken for granted, but act as a primary switch for our power output. We will talk about cycling shoes. And who is the best to invite for our first podcast? No one else know more in these topics and the watts and the millimeters in the cycling and understand the cycling as you, Dr. Borut Fonda. Welcome to our podcast. Borut, you are the scientist in the field of biomechanics, founder of Fonda Sport Performance, and an expert responsible for bike fitting and optimizing also the World Tour riders as Zuatu ambassador, Luka Mesgad, Domen Novak, and also one and only Tadej Pogačar. Today we will discuss not about the shoe colors and the weights of the cycling shoe, but what is actually important for biomechanics, how these forces are transferred and how the power is created. So maybe let's start with the basic. We know that foot is biologically designed for walking, and then we lock it inside of this stiff shoe and expect that the force is best transferred to the pedals and then power to the road. So what are the biggest challenges from actually at the beginning when you put your foot inside of these cycling shoes? What would you say these biomechanic challenges at the beginning?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for the invite. I think with the question itself, you already covered a very important aspect of this, is that the foot was not designed to fit into a stiff sole of the shoe, but it is designed to walk or to run. And the foot shape, from bones to tendons to fascia and muscles, is designed to transfer the elastic energy that's generated by the body so we can move more effectively. Now, once we put this foot into a rigid object as a shoe, a cycling shoe which got a carbon fiber or plastic sole, it's stiff. So we lose this aspect of transferring the energy through the so-called foot arch and our bones and fascia. So the primary thing, or the most important aspect, I would say, is the fitment itself. It's the stabilization of the foot, so we can transfer the energy to the pedal more effectively, so we don't lose anything in a so-called frontal plane. That we don't generate any of the forces that go left and right, because all of those forces are not just ineffective and we lose energy, but they can also harm the body. So we can generate some of the forces higher up at the body, like the knee, the hip. Even in some cases, we could even transfer that through to the pelvis and the spine. And all those forces can harm the body and cause injury, or at least a certain level of discomfort. So I would say fitment and support of the foot, once the foot is inside the shoe, is number one priority when you're choosing the shoes. Okay,
but we see in the market that the sole designs for some of the shoes are very flat. So the newer concepts are like this, that carbon shaped, like we call it boat shape, that this shell is designed so that hugs the foot higher on the both side. So why is this lateral support so critical, on your opinion?
So first of all, it prevents movement of the foot left and right. It creates like a rigid platform for the foot to be within where it's supposed to be, once the cleats are set up correctly, of course. At the same time, it kind of covers the more natural shape of the foot. So when you're pushing on the pedals, it goes in a more natural shape and it doesn't cause any discomfort. But all those characteristics of the boat-shaped shoe also come with some consequences, or let's call it attacks. And that means if the shape of the shoe does not fit the rider's foot, it can cause some discomfort. So for example, if it's too narrow, it's going to grab it much more than a normal shoe that's got flat and it's got some microfiber at the side where it would allow the expansion of the foot. But so in this case, it's critical that you choose the width of the sole, or the width of the shoe that fits the rider's foot.
Yeah, so we know that many cyclists have different kind of blocks like numbness or hot spots. So, and we know the manufacturers are producing very narrow soles of the cycling shoes. But at Zuatu Cycling, we have a different widths that riders can select from. So, from the biomechanical perspective, why it's so important that shoe is not too narrow for the forefoot? What's actually happening there also anatomically? Maybe you can explain us that we are more amateurs about this. What is actually happening there?
Yeah, it's a good question, but we first need to do a step back and see how it all started. If you look historically, I think the shoe industry is originating from Italy in general, not just cycling industry. And Italians, they're about fashion. We can't reject that. We all know that. And in past in history, really narrow shoes to go to work, we're speaking those elegant shoes, were very narrow because that was fashion at the time. And what happens when you wear these kind of shoes day by day, maybe 12, 16 hours a day, your foot is going to adapt. So you've restricted the foot to expand, the foot became narrow, and obviously the cycling shoe industry followed that. Not just in Italy, but globally, because that was kind of the shape of the foot back then. But now, in the last 10, 15 years, we have flip-flops, we have sandals, we have wide shoes, and our feet have adapted as well. And suddenly, if we take an average of random 500 people from the street and we measure their foot width, we're going to see that, and compare that data if we would have it to 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, it's much wider. So a lot of the shoes that you can buy off the shelf in a bike shop will probably going to follow still this historically narrow design of the cycling shoe. I'm not going to say that everyone's feet are wide. Some of the feet are also narrow, and in those cases, you need a narrow design. But my philosophy is that you need to choose the width of the shoe that fits you. That's why working with Zuatu it's so good, because you can choose from 3 to 4 different widths of the shoe to ensure that shoe shape and the platform, even if it's a boat shaped, is going to fit the rider's feet. And what if you don't do this? If it restricts, it will gonna compress the metatarsals. We have on our foot, we have metatarsals, we have phalanges, and we have the joints in between. And in between those joints, from the first to the fifth metatarsal, there are nerves, there's blood supply, there's a lot of important pathways for both proprioception and just in general blood supply to our feet that can get impinged, so-called. So basically, when you compress it, the joints go together, and that creates an impingement and so-called paresthesias. And those paresthesias, it's called numbness. You get foot numbness. You can get hot hot foot, and so on. There's a lot of conditions that could be more than just a discomfort. It can actually count almost as an injury or a medical condition, and that's why you should never experience this during cycling. And that's why choosing at the first place, before you're buying the shoes, not just by your eyes, but you're actually looking at the fit of the shoe, is crucial for optimal performance, not just the comfort.
Okay, so you need to select the right fit, and then there is a heat molding technology that comes into play when you can actually then adapt the sole, actually all malfunctions on your feet is then covered as well. So if you are also working with young riders that are starting and that they are also growing and the feet shape is changing, is this technology also very important for them we know that maybe in 1 year not they get one size bigger, but just feet will change differently. Is this also important that they use heat moldable technology as well? And how is this if we transfer this to pro riders? Why it's important for them that also have this kind of technology available?
Yeah. So if you first touch the subject of youth. It's hard to answer what's going to change quicker, their size or the shape of the foot. So this is very hard to answer. I don't really have a specific answer to that. But definitely, if the foot changes, and it could be due to you change some other restriction, as in footwear in general, like a leisure footwear or work footwear or whatever. Maybe you do a lot of skiing in an alpine boot that's going to restrict and it's going to change your foot shape. Heat molding can fix that, and you can always reheat it, remold it, and make sure it fits your foot at the given time. Now with youth, as we said, in 1 year, if the foot's still changing in terms of size, the size of the foot, the length of the shoe is also very important. So it should not be too small, too big, and so on. So I would not compensate for the size through the heat molding, but would choose the right size at the first place. Now with pro riders, it's also very important. Pro riders are adults, at least that's changing a little bit right now with the borderline getting lower and lower, but nonetheless, their foot's kind of designed and how it's going to be. And imagine spending 6 hours a day in that shoe, in the summer in high heat, in the winter sometimes even in lower temperatures. The foot's reacting differently, and having a heat moldable shoe, I would say, is a pre-requirement for every professional athlete.
Okay, so if we now move to these World Tour riders, people would probably, the listeners would say, okay, every pro rider have the right cycling shoe, and no pains and very custom fitted to them. Is that true?
Unfortunately, it's not. Although it is changing. So again, going back maybe 5 years, plus minus 3 years, there was a lot of shoe manufacturers that were sponsoring teams, which is nothing wrong. They would give them money and they would require that all team riders are wearing their specific brand of the shoes. But brands are also famous. Some brands have narrower shoes, some brands have wider shoes. Not many brands like Zuatu have both narrow and extra wide shoes. So in that case, I've worked with a lot of cyclists in the past where we had to cut the shoe to even just to fit their foot inside the shoe. And I think that's wrong. Nowadays, I think that changed, and shoes no longer sponsor teams, but they sponsor individual riders. So as individual riders, I would always advise them, choose the brand of the shoes based on performance and comfort and fit, and not based on the money that's offered to you. And most of them listen. I think they've learned their mistake, because they would probably once in their past career, they would struggle with correct shoes. I also know stories of riders who found the shoe that really fit them. We're speaking 10 years ago. And then they would stick to that specific model. Even if there was a new model of the shoe and another new model of the shoe, they would buy 10, 15, 20 pairs of those specific old pair of shoes just because it fit them.
Oh, nice story. So, if we now just move through the one of the let's say the matches and that we have on the peloton, can cycling shoe be a differentiator when you are maybe a lead out and you need to ride your captain to the
finish line? Yeah.
To the finish line. Thank you. Or is there also a difference when you start to attack somebody on some big climb? What is actually happening there? And maybe if you can explain, I know that you can explain very good what is happening with our feet and how we get the feedback back from the pedal and everything. And I think this is really nice to know for our listeners what is actually happening and why this touch point between the feet and the pedal is so important.
Yeah. So I just want to touch the base on the subject of, let's say, having a lead out or a sprinter and a climber. We need to know that on a Tour de France or any other stage race, both the lead out and the climber, they need to go through the entire stage. We're speaking that could be crosswinds, it could be rain, it could be high mountains, it could be flat and really fast, it could be even sprinting out of the corner just to stay with the bunch. I would say the requirements are not so different between one and another. Maybe we could differentiate when we speak about the time trialist, when aerodynamics is important and so on, but just in general, a lead out still needs to overcome 200 kilometers plus, maybe even some over the mountains, to get to that lead out. So if they would struggle just for the sake of that power transfer from the entire 200 kilometers before that, they would not be able to carry out a successful lead out for their sprinter. So I would say the shoes in general will not be so much different between the two riders. Now we mentioned about how important is the feedback, and the feedback we're talking about here is the proprioception feedback. And one of the things that's often neglected, when we walk, again, we cover the whole base of almost the entire base of our shoe, and we start with the heel, we go through the, let's say, lateral part, the outside part of the foot, and we go with the toe off from the base of the foot. In cycling, when we have a stiff sole, and if it's flat, we only cover certain parts of the foot that's in contact with the shoe. And that reduces the area and the amount of proprioception we get from the shoe itself. That's why it's very important that the shoe covers the shoe or the insole or the shape of the foot, most of our foot, so we get more support, not just in terms of energy transmission, in terms of how much support we offer, but also from how much of the proprioception is activated. Because this proprioception will dictate and give you feedback the direction of the force. By that, what I mean by that is when we generate force, we use our muscles, we generate force. But this force can be directed to the crank, which is totally ineffective. If I give you an example, at the bottom of the stroke, when the crank is pointing downwards, we can step on that pedal with 2,000 newtons plus. We're not going to move an inch. So it's important that we direct the force which is perpendicular to the crank, because that generates power. So with correct feedback, with good feedback from the shoe, that allows us to correct and direct the foot force in the direction of effective. So going back to lead out or attacks or time trialing, we want to minimize the energy that's wasted in order to transfer that to most important aspect, that's power. And with the correct fit of the shoe, with the correct support of the arch, for example, like here we also know lower arch, higher arch, but with Zuatu shoes we get different insoles. By default, you're going to find the correct shoe, and you'll be basically able to accomplish that.
Great, very nice insights. Maybe to wrap up, and we go back to a recreational cyclist. So we know when maybe two questions that I would like that you answer is when you are going to buying new shoes, what are some information that you need to have, and maybe what are some decision-making elements that you would actually collect the right shoe. And maybe another one is, we know that people are buying with their eyes, and they are checking the specifications of the cycling shoes, and they say, oh, this is 50 grams lower than this model. I would take this one because I could tell my friend that I have the lowest weight on my cycling shoe. Is this the right tactic, or maybe how should actually collect, if you are a recreational cyclist, which cycling shoe to pick?
Yeah, so I would say recreational cyclists should primarily focus on the fit and comfort. It doesn't matter if you're pushing 200, 100 or 2000 watts, you're still going to spend the vast majority of the time on the bike within those shoes. So having the right size, having the right width, and having the right fit is the number one priority. Second one, I think, should be the design. So if you don't like the shoes, it's hard to put them on. I mean, it's maybe not as important to some people, but I think cyclists are very fashion-oriented people and should definitely look at that. And the last would be the weight of the shoe. And saving 50 grams on just solely on the shoes, it's not going to give you any advantage if you struggle within the shoe. And I think most of the amateur riders and recreational riders, they can lose those 50 grams somewhere else much easier and much cheaper.
Yeah, this is motivation for all you that stopped doing workout on this Blue Monday that was in January, so maybe you could improve your performance. Borut, you're very knowledgeable about this topic. Where do our listeners and followers can find you to actually get more information, maybe also get your service? You're also providing services for recreational cyclists and also for the professional ones.
Yeah, so currently I'm based, me personally, in Slovenia, in Radovljica, close to Lake Bled. But what we're also doing, which could be maybe more for global riders, we are opening franchises worldwide now, basically under the same name. It's called FOSP, Fonda Sport Performance. They're going to be basically the same service with my knowledge, with my education, bike fitters now globally, worldwide present. So maybe keep an eye on that. They can contact me and I can help them out finding the best partner closer to them.
Okay, great. Very much for your time and all the information that you give to us. And to all of you listeners, this is our first podcast. Maybe it's not the perfectly moderated, but you will be very supportive if you subscribe, follow us, maybe share with your friends and give our brand some recognition around the world. So thank you for the listening. Thank you, Borut, once again.
Thank you for the invite.
Have a nice day.